Chapter 36. Sally was fuming as she strode across the stage towards Giles Longfellow's office. This was beyond endurance. Never mind the fact that her bloody sister was trying to usurp her role. Sally had a contract with the theatre that said she was the official understudy. As she approached the door to Giles' office, she could hear raised voices. She knocked loudly, and the shouting stopped immediately. There was a pause, and then the door was opened by Robert, who looked at her briefly and then pushed past her and left. Sally, come in, come in. Giles looked decidedly ill at ease and was mopping his brow with a silk handkerchief. Please sit down, dear. What can I do for you? Sally took a deep breath and jumped straight in. I am very disappointed to discover that somehow my sister Dora seems to have replaced me as understudy for Ophelia. I have a contract with the stage. I am employed as an ASM and to play small parts and understudy. Why have you not allowed me to continue in this capacity? Giles let out a long sigh. Oh, Sally, my dear, we have to go through all this now. I'm so stressed, as you can appreciate. I value your time and your talent enormously, but you can't do everything. You have been engaged with the dumb show, which I hear is fabulous, and you have had your usual duties to perform, finding props, etc. I felt it was impossible for you to understudy as well. But you could have talked to me about the situation, said Sally. You agreed I could put Dora on my other jobs, and once I had set up the dumb show, I would have been free once again to work with you and Isabel. I have arranged the whole thing to fit around my duties, and there is not a problem. Please, Giles, it is only fair you give me back the job. Apart from anything else, Dora is not experienced enough to hold the performance together, no matter what she thinks. Giles regarded Sally for a few moments and then remarked, Do I suspect a trace of filial jealousy? Oh, for goodness sake, cried Sally. I'm so sick of people always resorting to the old chestnut. I brought Dora here to work. I am proud of what she has achieved and happy for her. But that is not the point. I'm the understudy and I want my job back. Giles laughed, a deep throaty sound that resounded around the room. Well done, you. Oh, Sally, you win. You are the official understudy, and I will check with the printers that your name is in the program. Make sure you let Gwendolyn know about costumes and then meet me on stage to go through all the Ophelia scenes with Isabella. I might as well tell you now that there is every possibility that you will have to go on at some point, as the girl has some medical problems that may need attention. Obviously, we just hope and pray she is fine for the first night. Please keep all this to yourself, she added. Of course, replied Sally, trying to keep calm and hoping Giles would not notice a flush of exultation she could feel spreading across her whole face. Thank you, Giles. I am very grateful. She moved as swiftly as possible without looking at, as though she was rushing to the door. She just wanted to get away before he changed his mind. Once outside and out of earshot, she let out a whoop of delight and went to find her dear sister. Dora was still in the wardrobe department trying on costumes. Sally made sure she was very calm and businesslike. It would not do as well for her to look as though she was enjoying her assignment. Dora, can I have a word outside? Would you excuse us for a minute, ladies? Dora followed Sally out and up to the dressing room. So what is so secretive we have to come up here? She asked. I have just been talking to Giles and we have agreed that it is only right and proper that I get my job back as understudy to Isabel. Sally was interrupted by very petulant Dora. Oh, come on, Sally, that is not fair. I've worked really hard the last couple of weeks. I'm perfect for the part, and Rupert and I have a very special bond. I'm sure that is true, sister dear, and nobody's denying you have worked hard. But unfortunately, you do not have a contract, as I do, stating that you're the understudy. I too have worked hard for the last few months with this company, and it is only right and proper I get the perks of the job. Your turn will no doubt come one day if you continue to pursue your chosen career with the zeal you have shown so far. The two sisters stood seeing each other eyeball to eyeball. Neither wanted to be the first to break the spell. Finally, they both had to turn to face Janine, who announced breathlessly, Sally, you have to come quickly. Isabel has collapsed. They all rushed downstairs to the stage, where a very dramatic scene awaited them. Rupert was bent over Isabel, who was lying on the floor, surrounded by various members of the cast and crew. Robert was pacing back and forth, and Giles was standing at the edge of the group, looking lost. Has someone called an ambulance? Ordered Sally. Come on, guys, move out of the way. Give the girls some breathing space. She knelt down beside Rupert and tried to work out what was happening. The ambulance is on its way, called Gladys from the past door. I will bring them straight down, lovey. Don't you fret. Sally displayed her first aid technique to great effect, and having felt Isabel's pulse and established there was nothing too serious going on, she announced, I think she just fainted. Someone get me a towel soaked in cold water. Oh, you got one. Thanks, Heather. She took the towel from the stage manager and laid it across Isabel's forehead, just as the actress started to stir. There you go. Everything is all right, Isabel. You just fainted. Sally spoke softly to the girl as she slowly came to and became aware of her surroundings. There was a commotion from the other side of the stage, and two paramedics marched across to them. Is this the lady? Can we have her name, please? Isabel? Okay, Isabel, can you hear me? The two medics proceeded to put Isabel back together again, and everyone drifted away. Sally took Rupert by the arm and led him towards the edge of the stage. Would you like me to make you a cup of tea? She murmured. What happened? Don't worry about me. I'm all right. It was just a surprise. 1 minute she was fine, and the next she was on the floor. God, I hope she's going to be okay. I'm sure she will soon recover, Sally had a thought. Has she eaten anything today? She asked. I don't know. No, I don't think so. We didn't have time for breakfast this morning. Sally gritted her teeth at the thought of the two lovebirds tumbling out of bed. Does Isabel eat regular, Rupert? Sally wondered if he had any idea about the girl's eating problems. Yes, I guess so. I mean, we all eat at strange times here, don't we? I haven't really noticed, to be honest. Why do you ask? He looked at Sally inquiringly. Oh, no reason, just that Isabella is very thin, and you know what actors are like about their figures. You can never be too thin, but sometimes it can be dangerous. She needs all her strength at the moment with the girls we are working. Yes, I suppose you are right, said Rupert, looking as though he had no idea what Sally was going on about. Now, come on, let's go and find Giles and get some work done. I can take up my role again as understudy. Giles, Rupert, and Sally worked all afternoon. It was a fabulous rehearsal, and by the end of the day, Rupert was flushed with excitement. Let's go to Mrs. Long and get some chips, he said. That was fantastic, Sally. I really feel as if I have turned a corner, and I know I will be able to help Isabel too. Oh, great, thought Sally. All this effort for someone else to get the glory. But out loud, she agreed. You certainly have cracked it now. The last thing is going to be moving. Before they left the theatre, they got an update on Isabel. Apparently, the hospital was going to keep her overnight for a test, but she will be back tomorrow. I suppose I should go and visit her, said Rupert as they made their way next door to Mrs. Wong's. I'm sure she'll be fine and probably sleeping, so I don't think you need worry too much. Sally reassured him. Heather has gone to the hospital with her stuff for the night, so I would relax and just enjoy chips. Shall we get a bottle of wine as I treat? They got takeaway in the end and bought a bottle on the way to Sally's flat, where they spent a wonderful evening chatting about nothing in particular. They really did get on so well, and Sally was glowing with contentment. Suddenly the door opened and Dora appeared, weaving her way across the room. Oh, wow. What are you two up to, eh? When the cat's away in hospital, you're a quick worker, Rupee boy. Dora plonked herself on the sofa and started to take off her boots. Dora, you're drunk. What have you been up to? Said Sally, trying to change subject. I just drank my sorrow with the lads. Now I have been relegated to General Dog's body again by my scheming sister. So, Rupert, what are you doing here? You didn't answer my question. Dora had managed to get her boots off and was now splayed across the sofa watching Rupert, who was sitting nearby on the cover with his glass of wine. I'm enjoying a glass of wine with your lovely sister. Is that not allowed? Asked Rupert, complete unaware of the undercurrent swirling around him. Do you want a sandwich or something? To mop up the booze? Sally was hovering at the kitchen door, desperate to create a diversion. She knew what Dora was like in this mood. No thanks, I'm going to bed in a minute. What are you two going to do? Dora leered at Rupert, who quite innocently replied, I'm off to in a minute. Got another hard day tomorrow. Isabel is going to be back in the morning, so we are all good to go. He got up and finished off the last of his wine. I will see you tomorrow, Sally, and thanks again for today. You have been a star. He went to kiss Sally on the cheek, and Dora chimed in. I bet you are disappointed, aren't you, Sal? Isabel's going to be okay. How very annoying. Sally was leading Rupert to the door as quickly as she dared. She tried to sound light-hearted as she replied, okay, saying, okay, oh, Dora, stop it. Of course I'm delighted that Isabel is recovering. We had a lovely time this afternoon, but that is all part of the job. Thank you, Rupert, for working with me today. I look forward to putting it together with Isabel tomorrow. She closed the door with a sigh of relief and then turned to her sister. What the hell is the matter with you? Why are you being such a bitch? I'm beginning to wonder whether you should think about leaving, because quite frankly I've had enough of your machinations and insults and bad behaviour. Now give me a break, responded Dora, sitting up now and ready for a fight. Who are you to decide whether I leave or not? I have the theatre to think of, and my responsibilities to the rest of the cast. I happen to care about them, you know, she said hotly. Oh, really? So then why don't you get on with the job in hand and stop giving me a hard time? I don't want to fight, Dora. I don't understand what has gone wrong between us. We were having such fun in the beginning. Sally went to sit beside Sister on the couch. Dora looked sullen. It is just so frustrating sometimes watching you at work and wanting to be doing it myself. I just want to get on, Sally, and you are happy to plod along and take things as they come. I want to make things happen. Then you have taken away the one thing I was really into, and now I'm back to square one. Dora was pacing the room, and now like Cat, she is very beautiful, thought Sally. Much more like an actress ought to be than me. Maybe she is right, and I'm ruining her chances, but not making the best of my own. Out loud, she said, I'm sorry about the understudy thing, but you have to understand I have looked forward to that since the beginning of the season. I didn't know you were going to come here and turn into an aspiring actress overnight. I don't want to be the enemy. Sally suddenly felt exhausted. Look, let's try and have fun like we were before. You'll get a great part in the next production, I'm sure. Giles really likes you, and I will remind him you are keen to work as an actress. We are doing Victorian music hall next, you idiot, so I get a couple of solos. Big deal. That is not going to show off my acting skill, is it? Dora complained. Sally was defeated. Okay, sorry, I forgot, but please just be patient, like we all have to be. Why should you get everything all at once? With that, she took the wine glass into the kitchen and left Dora to ponder life's foibles. As she crossed the living room to go to bed, Dora stopped her and gave her a hug. Oh, sis, I truth, I will try not to wind you up or give you a hard time. Sally gave her a hug back and said, thank you, dear. That makes me very happy now. I need to sleep. I'll be so glad when this production finally opens. Night, night. But as she undressed in her room, Sally wished she felt better about her situation with Dora. She still loved her sister, but didn't like or trust her very much, and that felt so sad. Every instinct told her things were never going to be the same between them again when this job finally came to an end. Finale, The Walk Down. Chapter 37. Let's all go to the Strand. Let's all go to the Strand. I'll be leader, you can march behind. Come with me and see what we can find. The first rehearsal of Hamlet was an absolute disaster. It lasted 4 hours, and by the time the curtain came down, everybody had lost the will to live. Giles told everyone to go home and sleep on it. It being any version of terrible acting that any one of them could muster. Sally had a nightmare that she was buried in a grave on stage, and nobody could hear her shouting to be free. She woke the next morning in a terrible sweat, trembling with panic. It took half the morning for her to shake herself free of the sense of doom that hung over her. When she got to the theatre for the note session, she could almost smell the clods of earth descending on top of her again. All right, Sally, the familiar voice of Heather cut through the daydream. Oh, God, Heather, I had the most terrible nightmare last night, started Sally, but Heather broke in with, me too. I was the stage manager of this awful production of Hamlet. She burst out laughing, and after a couple of seconds, Sally joined her, relieved to be able to understand finally that it had only been a nightmare. Oh, dear God, what a night. What are we going to do, Heather? 4 hours of unadulterated crap. The bloke playing the ghost was like something out of Disney cartoon, and when Peggy nearly did the splits as the truck went off, well, it had indeed been an unforgettable moment. Having warned everybody so many times that they must make sure they were standing on the upstage part of the truck behind the carefully drawn luminous line, it was with growing horror that Sally watched Peggy take up her final position for the dumb show tableau, with one foot on one side of the line and one on the other. As the truck slowly moved back upstage, so did Sally's leg move apart, one going upstage, the other down. Just as the disaster seemed inevitable, the actress hauled her downstage leg from ground and toppled slowly into the gap where the grave would have been. As the blackout descended, Heather rushed into the stage and dragged her off. The incident would definitely go down in the annals. Poor Peggy was hysterical, refusing to go on stage ever again. This morning, Sally went straight to her dressing room with a box of chocolate she had brought in on the way in. Oh, bless you, darling, what a lovely thought. I must say I was beside myself last night, but I am back to my old self today. Nothing like a good night's sleep and a few whiskies to put me straight. Percy said he thought I was going to lose my virginity all over again, cheeky sod. At that moment, Percy appeared at the connecting door, saying, "Bit of a no-go last night, eh? Reckon we will have a few cuts, don't you, love?" "Oh, Percy, who knows? Maybe it will all come together. It was a first dress after all," said Sally, trying to be optimistic. "Come on, let's go and hear what our director has to say." Giles Longfellow faced his cast and crew with remarkable stoicism. "It was not good," he began. "However, there were moments when I could see the light, and although we had a good deal of to embrace, I think we can do so with positivity. I'm not going to give individual notes just yet. The first thing we're going to do is run the play, sitting here now and getting the lines right. You have to understand that there is nowhere in a Shakespeare play that you can make up the words if you forget them. Everyone has to be word perfect. After that, I will decide what to rehearse first first this morning. Right, Heather, start the clock. After the word run, Robert took the boys away to practice the fights, and Giles got hold of Henry Hooper, who had been cast to play the ghost. He was an old actor who lived locally and had been delighted to be asked to appear. It was an unmitigated disaster, however, and Giles was forced to ask him to leave. It had just not worked out. I'm sorry, Henry, but we will give you your wages and hopefully there will be another opportunity to see you. Giles had no alternative but to play the part himself. It was also agreed that some of Sally's dialogue in the dumb show would be cut. She was not surprised and set to work chopping and changing the script as subtly as she could. In the midst of all the activity, Isabel announced to Giles that she had to go to London for a medical issue and would be away for the night. It would mean she was not available for the second dress rehearsal. It is fucking unbelievable, Giles raged to Edward Graham. The only light in Giles' life at the moment was his meeting with Teddy. They had arranged to have dinner in the Queen's Hotel in Manchester. It was rare for Lord Graham to allow himself to stay in such places, but being midweek, it was relatively quiet, and George Delaware, the owner, was very discreet and made sure he chose the staff on duty who would deal with the room service. He just loved the fact that his hotel entertained a lord and nothing was too much trouble. Discretion was very much the order of the day with his lordship, and George had been rather thrown when his son Eddie had tipped up. The first few times George had assumed the boy was with friends of a certain persuasion, but when he had spent his first long weekend with a rather attractive young actor called Jeremy, George began to think he might have a problem with the father and son. George had opened his club after his last stint in prison. He was well known to the Manchester police as a villain of long standing, but few people on either side of the fence knew George was homosexual. Had anyone in the police known this before 1967, they would no doubt have added the felony to the list. Fortunately for George, the Sexual Offence Act was passed in 1967 and it was no longer illegal to be a homosexual. However, George realised it would be many years before certain sections of society were ready to accept gay men. Gay was a word that for many years had suggested someone was with a racy lifestyle. Slowly it became a more pleasant way of describing a man or woman for that matter, who was homosexual, which was such a clinical term. George had spent the last 20 years defending his gay customers and yet at the same time promoting them. His club became a refuge in the late 1960s for men who could not come out, as it were. It was unbelievable that even now in 1982, men like Lord Graham had to hide their true sexuality, but the Queen's Hotel had also become a leading light in gay clubs. Men from all over the world would visit and stay in one of the elaborately decorated rooms. Nowadays, the police regularly visit to, either for personal reasons or for information. George had retained his ability to keep his ear to the ground. What he didn't know about went on in his city wasn't worth knowing. George's latest campaign was to bring to the attention of the gay community a very dark and forbidding phenomenon that had first reared its ugly head in America last year. It was an unknown disease which presented itself in the early stages as flu, but as the months and sometimes years went on, it developed and attacked the immune system until the patient ultimately died. The New York Times had reported in July last year that there appeared to be a new form of illness which presented among gay men. There was a rush of young gay men turning up at hospitals in the city of New York, all with the same symptom. They dubbed it the gay cancer. George knew only too well how ignorance could cause panic, and the public always reacted before knowing the facts. He himself had witnessed an incident recently in a gay club in London where a young man was eating in the restaurant, and another customer called the manager and suggested there was a problem because the young man in question had lesions on his skin and could infect the rest of the customers. It had been a very unpleasant situation and in the end the young guy was forced to leave. George had followed him out and they had gone for a drink. And the young man told George his sorry tale. His name was Barry and he was 23. He had been on holiday in New York for 4 years, and as usual for a young guy, had spent hours in the clubs. About 2 months after he returned to England, he developed flu-like symptoms and went to his doctor, who basically just told him to take aspirin and hot drinks. Then 2 years later, he noticed that his glands were swollen. He kept getting mouth ulcers and night sweats. He was referred to a hospital, and after several blood tests, was told he had HIV or AIDS. There was no cure, the doctor informed him, and they could not estimate how or when death would occur, except that research to date was indicating the disease attacked the immune system, so he should be careful not to go anywhere near people with infection of any sort. The boy was distraught. His family had thrown him out when they discovered he was gay. Other friends said he had brought it on himself for being a poof and would have nothing to do with him in case they caught it. He was in such a state he was talking about suicide. George took Barry back to Manchester and put him to work in the hotel. He then sat down and found out as much as was possible about the deceased so far. He quickly realised it was a deadly foe and that there was going to be a huge outcry as more and more men and women died. He was appalled that the gay community was attacked for bringing it upon themselves, and it was only after hours of reading reports and actual speaking to doctors in the USA that George got the real facts, or as many as were available at the time. AIDS was the general term used to cover the illness, though it was a much more complicated scenario involving the immune system. The disease was capable of infecting anyone, but because it entered the body through the blood, it was passed on through sexual encounters or infected needles as used by drug addicts. Obviously, those most at risk would appear to be gay men and addicts who used dirty needles. George was now on a mission to educate the gay community. He started with his own stuff and explained all he knew about the disease. He tried to impress on all his friends the need to wear protection when having sex. This was not just another venereal disease, this was a death sentence. He watched over his customers like a shepherd with his flock. Sadly and tragically, so many of the younger guys just did not listen and brushed off the advice as old man panicky. It won't happen to me, was the inevitable cry to cur. One man who was beginning to face up to his fate was Robert Johnson. George had known Robert for several years and they had once been lovers. Robert had contracted HIV 3 years ago and was made very aware that his time was limited. He and George had spent many hours talking about his dilemma, and George had watched helplessly as his friend became more and more bitter and disillusioned with life, or the life he had left. Last year, Robert went to work at Crew Theatre and began an affair with the director there called Giles Longfellow. The couple seemed well suited, and when Robert brought Giles to meet George, they had all got along very well. George had begged Robert to tell Giles about his illness, but he refused, saying it would only mess things up for him. Robert seemed so much more positive about his situation and was talking about going to London with Giles and becoming a director. George let his pleasure in seeing Robert feeling better take over his common sense, which was to advise Robert to come clean. But suddenly everything changed. Again, Robert turned up at the Queen's one night in a terrible state. It was all over with Giles and he was heartbroken. George spent days with Robert, cajoling him into a better frame of mind. Slowly Robert responded, but he was never the same again. He remained withdrawn and watchful. He was cynical and aloof. He liked to stir things up for people. Why should they be happy when his life was so fucked up? Was how he described his motive to George. Now another problem was looming in the horizon. Robert was back at Crewe, working as assistant director to Giles Longfellow, who was currently having an affair with Lord Graham, whose son Eddie was also turning up the Queens with a young actor based at Crewe. None of this boded well, and George was on alert to pick up the pieces. Chapter 38. Shall we make the first night black tie? Mused Giles, as he and Robert sat having a sandwich for lunch in his office. It would make it a really special occasion, the like of which has never been seen before in Crewe. I think that is pushing your luck, my dear, replied Robert. How many men own a dinner jacket these days? Why not just put dress glamorous, and they can decide for themselves? We tell them to come dressed in style for our Victorian music hall shows, don't we? The audience always love dressing up for that. Oh God, we have got that to contend with in 2 weeks' time, exclaimed Giles. I can't believe the time goes so quickly, except during our production of Hamlet, commented Robert, bringing Giles back down to earth. The horrible bump. Christ, yes, we must lose another 15 minutes, Robert. Have you got any suggestions? Actually, I have one to cut down the sword fight between Hamlet and Letters. I do think it goes on too long for that point in the play. We are nearing the home run and we should be speeding up the pace. I also feel that the boys need to pick up their cues in all those bitty scenes with fortune bras and stuff. Marvellous overview of the great play by our director, sneered Robert with a big double of sarcasm. Bitty scenes with fortune bras and stuff. What the fuck does that mean? Giles regarded Robert across the desk and sensed there was more to this outburst than appeared on the surface. Is something wrong, Robert? He asked. Where to start? The other man returned. The production stinks, Giles, and is your fault because you have taken your eyes off the ball and spent too much time shagging his lordship. Giles finished chewing his sandwich, wiped his mouth on his paper serviette and took a sip of coffee. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost a whisper. How dare you talk to me like that? Who the fuck do you think you are? only here because I felt sorry for you after everything that happened last year. You have no qualification to direct, and certainly no right to talk to me as you do. What is your problem, Robert? You ponce around being patronising to the actors most of the time. You nitpick at every opportunity, and to be honest, your directorial skills are pretty shabby, and now you have the gall to blame me for mistakes in this production. Robert held his ground. Yes, I do blame you, Giles. Who else is there to blame? I have done my bit, whether you like it or not, and as for my personality faults, well, tough. No one is perfect, but you are the director at the end of the day. You cast the play, you agreed to sign, and you are the head of this whole caboodle. So, yes, the buck rests with you. Giles absorbed the blows and contemplated next. His next move. He knew he had failed miserably to put the production together, and he also knew that his emotional life had once again distracted him from the job in hand. This was to have been his big chance. How ironic was it that years ago Teddy Graham had bailed him out of trouble so he could pursue his career once more, and now it was Teddy who was the cause of the trouble. Robert knew too much about him for Giles not to not acknowledge some of these facts, but it would make him weak, and Robert needed no encouragement to take advantage of him in the vulnerable position he had put himself. He chose his words carefully. I'm truly sorry that you feel this way, and maybe I have made a mistake, but now is not the time to upbraid me for them. We have 2 days to the first fight. Robert, can we not work together to put the show on and then discuss our difference? I'm assuming you will not want to work with me after this, and do not see a future for the play in London. He looked questioningly at Robert, who was still standing tense and straight backed in front of the desk. Robert now relaxed and moved to the big wing chair in the corner of the room and sat down slowly. He took out his cigarette and lit one, inhaling the blue curling smoke and holding it in his lungs for a moment before releasing the smoke in a thin stream through pursed lips. How we come to the crux of the matter, Giles, my dear. If you are happy to admit mistakes, so am I happy to admit lack of experience in the directorial state. You and I know I will not get employed by anyone else after this, so we are stuck with each other. I have every intention of going to the West End with this production, and you know we'll do everything in our power to make that happen, won't we? Robert took another drag of his cigarette and waited for Giles to answer. Robert, is this a game of some sort? What are you trying to say? On the one hand, you think I'm useless as a director, yet on the other, you are suggesting we pull this off between us and continue to work together. I really don't see how this is going to happen. I have to be completely honest and say I'm not sure I want to work with you anymore after this. I don't think you have a choice, said Robert very quietly. Giles, you and I were once in love, and then you dropped me for the sake of idle gossip and your current career prospects. Pretty pathetic excuse for destroying someone's life, don't you think? But to be fair, when I came to you this year and suggested we work together, you gave me the opportunity to follow my dream and become a director. I'm not going to let you drop me again as casually as you did last time, especially as you seem intent upon running your chance of a lifetime for romance. So if you need a little persuasion, let's talk about Lord Graham and his son Eddie, shall we? Eddie has followed in his father's footsteps, and I'm not talking about agricultural college. Young Edward is proving quite the gay young thing in social circles in Manchester, especially in the Queen's Hotel. I know you enjoy the delights of this venue as anxious you do George and his happy band. I also know that you enjoy many nights with his lordship under the protection of George. All well and good, you may say, but I do not think his lordship would be happy to know his son is indulging his passion of young men's flesh under the same roof and risking the family name in doing so. I would be happy to have a word in his ear should you and I not find a way to carry on. Surely it is much better all round that we keep things in the family, so to speak. We should all be looking after each other and our reputations, don't you think? Robert sat back and waited for Giles to respond. He gleamed enormous satisfaction from watching the man sweat. He could see the thoughts running through Giles' head, the panic and fear in his eyes. Let someone else feel helpless and abandoned like he had been. He lived every day now with the promise of death, and he made him intolerant of those who took life and good fortune for granted, those people who walked through life taking what they wanted with no thought of what havoc they might wreak on others' emotions. Giles was a weak man who always managed somehow to wriggle out of trouble. Well, lucky him. This time he would find it a little more difficult, and maybe his misfortune would be lucky for Robert. It was too late to save him from the fate that so cruelly awaited him, but not too late to make whatever was left of his life worth living. Robert saw Giles swallow hard, and his Adam's apple rose and fell in contradiction to the faint outward calm he was presenting across the desk. Giles then rose and came round to the front of the desk and leaned against it. Well, well, life is full of surprises. Why don't you and I go now and get this play ready for the spectacular first night in Crewe? Who knows where it may lead us? He walked to the door and held it open for Robert, who rose from the chair like a bird of prey and crossed the room in one fell swoop to pause and pursue his prey before making his exit. Thank you for listening.